Hey guys, what's up? Excoundrel here, and this is my very first non-EA Game Changers, non-EA sponsored Command & Conquer Rivals video. I'm making this specifically because I love the game right now. I've been absolutely addicted for about 2 weeks, and I wanted to test a format of how I would maybe talk about meta decks that you guys can use when ranking up in Command & Conquer Rivals. I want your feedback on this video. I want to know if you think the format's good, whether you want to see some things change, what you really liked about it. Tell me in the comments below. I'll read all of them. So I've been playing this game a lot. I'm Tiberium League in NOD, almost Tiberium League in GDI. And so we're going to start with the GDI decks to begin with. Now this is from SoftServe, this particular deck here. Although he didn't invent the GDI meta deck, this is his particular variant using Solomon. The 4 major cards that you need to use are Rifleman, Missiles, Pitbull, and Predator. Now most people at high end would say that snipers are core. However, at the lower end of things, you might not have snipers, so you can replace them for either Shockwaves or the Rhino. You can also change your commander. Lieutenant Strongarm is really good in the early game control and good in the mirror matchup. Jackson gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of what you want to do on the map. Solomon is really good versus tech-heavy decks because the Ion Cannon can one-shot expensive units. The Talon can be switched out for a multitude of things. Hammerhead against heavy air, MLRS against heavy vehicle, Kodiak against heavy vehicle, and so on and so forth. That last deck slot is very, very flexible, and you guys should definitely experiment with it to see what you think works best. So here is me playing the deck in a mirror matchup versus a guy called Matt Charges in Tiberium League. And this was a challenge match for me, which meant that the pressure was on to try and get the win, to get those juicy extra points. Now, I actually ended up going Talon early into his Rifleman, and a very, very obvious response from Matt was the Pitbull. So a lot of this early game is essentially microing the Pitbulls and the Talons away from each other, trying to get the Missile Troopers in place, and you can see here that's what I'm trying to do in this specific scenario. This Pitbull is causing me a lot of issue, and it's forcing me to pump out many, many missile squads to deal with it. Luckily, I'm just a little bit quick with that Talon, and that gives me advantage on this top middle platform, meaning that I'm able to respond pretty quickly with multiple missile squads, and that means I'm going to get these Pitbulls down as quickly as I physically can. I also now have enough Tiberium to get snipers out, and once the snipers are out, they control the map very nicely versus those 2 missile squads, and that buys me enough time to get a Predator online. His Predator is slow, and by microing my snipers back and forth, I prevent him from getting onto this point, and I can still keep them alive to help control versus the rifle squads that are now being aggressive towards that point in the center of the map. Now this is where I thought things were about to go down the pan. The Kodiak comes out. Now if his Kodiak had gone into my Predator tank, this game probably would have been over. But for some reason, he felt like he wanted to rush my base, which means that my Predator tank at the back of the map is able to get on his point. I then use an Ion Cannon to blow up that tech unit, and he actually now is impossible for him to respond, and I ended up taking the second missile. That was a mistake on his part. I probably would have lost the game if he chased the Predator tank down with my Kodiak, but you take advantage of your opponent's mistakes sometimes in this game, and I just so happened to do that there. We're now going to watch Blade play with the variant with Jackson. You know that I said Jackson gives you a little bit more flexibility with your units. You'll see that in this particular scenario here. Blade opens with double Rifleman, a very standard start for this deck. It allows you to be more aggressive, push against the single Rifleman of your opponent, and allows you to scout out the buildings as well as if the opponent is going double Harvester. This is kind of what Blade did here. He's got a bit of information. He saw that the War Factory came out, and that's now allowed him to respond to the Chem Buggy with the Pitbull. By using Jackson's power onto the Pitbull, he sort of cycles the buggy away, micros it, and prevents it from getting on top of his Rifleman, and that allows him to trade up against almost 2 Chem Buggies, which are actually pretty expensive units, as you might know if you've played them. From the back of this, with the Predator tank, there is almost no response from Churro for the Predator tank, and with the aggressive maneuvers of his Rifleman, he's able to get the first missile of the game. Something that Blade does really well is constantly moves all of his units. Never really leaves many of his units idle, and always tries to make sure that he's doing something with them. This allows him to be very proactive and can pressure his opponent's economy as well, which he has been doing in this particular game. You'll notice that the Predator tank and the Pitbull able to take out the Harvester, and that starts to strangle Churro's economy. Churro now is desperately Tiberium starved, and versus the snipers, he really has very little answer. When you have an opponent has got Pitbulls, Predators, and snipers on the map, you want to have a mix of anything between Missile Troopers and Talons and Riflemen to try and pressure him. Unfortunately, after starving his economy, Blade was able to make sure that that went heavily in his favor. We're going to have a look at the upper end of the GDI spectrum now, specifically looking at the GDI Tech deck. This is the one that Dr. Liang is useful in. There is really only 2 core units in my opinion, Missile Troopers and Shockwaves. They get you through the early game. A lot of people love running Titans right now though because of the very vehicle heavy meta that we have, and if you can get Titans out versus most aggro decks, they really don't have the tools to deal with them, and they completely dominate from here on out. Any commander can work in this deck. They all have different playstyles, but honestly, Dr. Liang is probably the most useful. And a lot of the other units can sub in and sub out depending on what you are facing up against. For instance, lots of air, the Hammerheads or the Zone Troopers are good. Lots of infantry, you can have the Disruptor. Lots of vehicles, you can run the Kodiak alongside your Titan, although you don't really need to. So there's lots of decisions that you can make with this particular deck that makes it very good. We're going to have a look at a replay here of our boy Nivmet. He is very, very good at playing this deck. He's got a great win rate on it. Unfortunately, Irvalk made a mistake very early on here. He committed to 2 rifle squads, which means that even though he spied out the double harvester, he doesn't actually have the resources to deal with it. So he's going to play for the longer con game here, and is going to look to go with the Scorpion tank to try and pressure. Unfortunately, he did the good job of charging the point, and Nivmet has now allowed the opponent to charge the point, which has then allowed him with 2 sets of squads to micro and get the first missile. Versus an aggressive NOD deck, getting the first missile is insanely good. This relieves the pressure on Nivmet. It means that he doesn't have to go all in on this second point, knowing that eventually his economy is going to outweigh his opponent. And once the Titans are on the board, especially when he's rocking multiple Titans, there is absolutely no way he loses. So he's in a really strong position in this game just from having won that first missile. The problem of going against an aggressive NOD deck, if they win the first missile, they then have Kane's Obelisk of Light to protect the second missile. And especially at this point in the game, you'll see that one Titan just isn't good enough versus the Obelisk of Light, and it actually means that second missile went over to Irvalk. So if Irvalk could actually just put more pressure on getting the first missile instead of trying to put pressure on Nivmet's double harvester, he may have actually come out on top in this game. But Niv, with the really heads-up play, getting that first point actually means that he is now in complete command. And really, there just isn't the economy or the units to sustain Irvalk at this point in time. A double Titan frontline at the top, not even threatened by the Obelisk of Nod, means there is almost nothing that he can do, and Nivmet ends up taking the win. Really well played by Nivmet in that particular game. We're now going to move on to our NOD counterparts, and we're going to start to have a look at some of the decks that define the NOD meta right now. And now we're going to have a look at the counterpart to the GDI deck on the NOD side of things. Very aggressive, super early point control, need to get that first point win. 4 core units in here. The Militants, the Laser Troopers, the Attack Bikes, and the Scorpions. Gives you great mid-game presence. A lot of things can be switched in and out on this depending on what you want to achieve. Commanders can be switched up. Jade, a little bit like Solomon, good at dealing with individual tech units in the late game. Kane gives you great second point control with the Obelisk of Light, and Oksana gives you flexibility. The Flame Troopers can go in and out for Chemical Troopers, especially when you're running Jade, and other flexibility you can get from the Venom. Stealth Tanks, you can go for Phantoms for air control, Basilisks if you want a late game get out clause versus things like Wolverines and Titans. You can go for the Banshee, you can also go for the Chem Buggy if you don't want to run the Chem Warriors, and Chem Buggy is very good at dealing with infantry, so it's a super good early unit to use in those situations. We're going to take a look at Mav Mitchell, another top-end leaderboard player, using the Seth variant of this deck. You can see he gets a very early scout off with his militants. He doesn't go for double militants here. It gives him some ability to react to whatever his opponent has gone. He saw the Flame Troopers come out, and that means he's going to respond with his own set of Flame Troopers. The best response to Flame Troopers is a Venom. So it's probably likely at this point that Mav Mitchell is looking to go for a Venom, seeing as he's now seen 3 sets of Flame Troopers on the board. The Attack Bikes come out shortly afterwards, but with some good micro, he should be able to get enough damage done to all of these Flame Troopers to make it worth it. He's now going to start to respond with the assault attack bikes of his own variant, and all he has to do here is try and block the points to prevent the enemy from getting on top of them, or use a Venom to go and contest that back left point, which he does, and you can see the points are net in his favor, meaning he gets that first missile, which is so crucial in this deck, because this continues to pressure the opponent. If you get that first missile, your opponent is consistently on the back foot. And the opponent has seen the Scorpion tank come out, and that means the Banshees are going to start to let loose. Banshees good against Venoms, they're also good against the Scorpion tanks, and that means the only thing in Mav Mitchell's deck that he really has to contest this is Attack Bikes and Laser Troopers. Unfortunately, the Obelisk comes down, which means that Mav is in a tough situation. He doesn't have too many things in his deck that are great versus the Obelisk, but he sees there are actually a very few anti-air units on the board. Venoms can trade evenly into Missile Troopers, and the Obelisk can't target air. So that means that by using his Flame Troopers and the Venoms in the correct situation, he manages to eke out a very clutch point control, which gives him the second missile. We're going to have a look at the final deck that I like playing right now as well. It's the NOD Air deck. This is a very short coverage of this because there isn't really many swaps you can make. It is a double harvester deck, which means you need to have that combo of the Laser Troopers and the Flame Troopers to protect your early game. So this was actually the game that got me into Tiberium League with NOD, and it was versus a guy called Rest of Even. It was a challenge match. He went for double militants early on, which meant that I ended up going for the Flame Troopers. Now, I often start Missile Troopers because it is considered a safe start, especially versus NOD. On the off chance that they tend to attack bike rush you, having those Laser Troopers out on board is a really good way of preventing that aggression. So he saw that I went for the air tower, and then my best response to buggies is always going to be the Banshee in this particular deck. So he had a nice response with the Laser Troopers, meaning that, you know, it's very difficult to me to pressure these buggies right now. I go for a double harvester, and unfortunately due to a little misplay on my part, I end up giving away the first missile because I end up losing my Banshee versus his particular deck. And now with the Banshees coming out, I need to start getting some real anti-air out, and that's the Phantom. The unfortunate thing about level 10 Phantom versus a level 11 Banshee is a singular round of missiles doesn't actually get the job done. You have to be very careful about going head-to-head with a lot of units when you have an under-leveled Phantom, and in this situation you can see here it lives with an absolute sliver of HP. However, my economy at this point is good enough to start pumping out the Infernos. One of my favorite units in the game right now. They are absolutely insane in terms of zonal control. They one-shot those attack bikes, and as long as I am able to continuously out-pressure his Banshees with my Phantoms, that puts me in a really good situation in this particular game. I do need to try and team up on these Banshees, as you're seeing. My double Phantom into his singular Banshee is a really important way of dealing with them. But with the combination of my Infernos and my Obelisk of NOD, the zonal control versus his deck is just too strong. And my Phantoms, although they don't take out the Banshee in one shot, they definitely nullify it. And you can see here that even with the Tiberium missiles, I have enough control over my entire base right now to be able to get the two missile platforms towards the end. It's a super strong late game deck, and as long as you have those Phantoms out, you can protect the majority of your Infernos. Right, that was the meta deck list video. I think that I'm probably going to try and cut down on some of the replays, especially because they're at 2x speed. It's very difficult to commentate on them properly. But this is a tester really, because the game's not out until the 4th of December. So this is just a tester for the next 2 weeks to see if you guys think that this is a good format. And if you play Command & Conquer Rivals, whether it helps you out in terms of finding decks that suit you. I can't really post every single deck under the sun, but I just thought these 4 decks would be a good start. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you soon.